If you've ever wondered whether either of these women, Erica Kirk or Candace Owens, have female psychopathy, you may want to listen. There's a lot of allegations out there. There's a lot of controversy and characteristics and traits being thrown around ever since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But I'm not here to diagnose anybody. I'm not here to confirm accusations or anything like that, but I do want to provide actual characteristics and traits of female psychopathy because they do differentiate quite a bit from male psychopathy. So in this video, I'm just going to be telling you some of the very distinct characteristics between female psychopathy and male psychopathy, because women who have psychopathy are very different in how they present, even their past, their adolescence, their childhood, and it may surprise you quite a bit. And I'm also going to give you a survey or show you a survey that you can do to kind of determine where you would stand in terms of being low, average, or high in female psychopathy. So psychopathy can be looked at as a neurodevelopmental delay with some sexual dimorphism to it, where there's a distinction between men and women who have it. That's not the way everybody looks at it or every psychologist looks at it, but it is kind of more of an upcoming way that people are trying to understand psychopathy, especially in females. The sexual dimorphism, you're going to see that in things like autism as well, that men and women with autism present differently. So if you can kind of think of psychopathy in those terms, that may make more sense. Previously, the research on psychopathy was done primarily on men, or they assumed that it was more prominent in men. That's still the case, whether you're looking at like conduct disorder in adolescence or just the adult population, even in prisons, that statistically it still shows that men are higher in psychopathy. But I think research is outdated. I think hopefully in the next 10 years or so, the next couple decades, we'll be able to understand a little bit more of it if psychology research allows for it, because female presentation of it is very different. Psychopathy is not something that can be diagnosed. It's more of a personality type, if you can think of it that way. You may have heard something called antisocial personality disorder, which is part of the cluster B psychopathology, but that has more to do with people committing crimes or acts of violence or various things like that. There is some overlap with psychopathy, but psychopathy is not something that people can diagnose. So when children are younger, they may develop something called oppositional defiant disorder. So that's kind of like defiance or acting out when they're quite young. That may develop into something called conduct disorder, but not everybody who has oppositional defiance disorder develops conduct disorder, and not everybody with conduct disorder had ODD, so keep that in mind. But conduct disorder is almost like this prerequisite towards antisocial personality disorder and sometimes psychopathic traits. So conduct disorder in adolescence, for boys it looks like it's acting out, it's like setting fires, it's being cruel to animals, it's being violent towards other people, whether that's your family or friends or peers. A lot of these individuals come from impoverished environments, not all of them, but sometimes that is the case with their family dynamic or their environment that they were brought up in is not very healthy. These are the kids who kind of get in trouble a lot when they're younger. I think about 40% of them go on to develop antisocial personality disorder, and for men typically make up, or men with antisocial personality disorder make up about a third of the prison system in the United States. So again, people assumed that women didn't have as high of levels of conduct disorder and psychopathy in the past because they weren't as violent. They weren't as cruel to animals. But what we've noticed more recently is that how women present or how they show levels of aggression is very different from boys or men. Again, men are very they externalize a lot of their aggression, so that's why they can get in fights or beat each other up or act out in very external ways. But women are very covert with how they show signs of aggression. And if you're a woman watching this, you know that, you understand that. And it's not something that people really like to admit about women, but women can be brutal. They can be sneaky with each other. They can be manipulative. They can be very harsh towards one another. And that is ultimately what female psychopathy is all about. It is about gossiping and rumor spreading. It's about verbal and relational aggression that women who have psychopathy seek to destroy their targets through social sabotage, through saying terrible things about them, through gossiping and rumors and various things. So they do so covertly. So most people are not actually in tune with that. They don't see women who behave this way or humiliate others, even if it's on social media. When women make money off humiliating people online, and I know some men do this well, and I think it's more like a cultural influence, because obviously assaulting people is not appropriate in modern times, as it probably would have been like 2,000 years ago. It wasn't as big of a deal. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying times have changed. So even men have taken on these kind of like social sabotage or relational ways of aggression now. So I made a pretty extensive list about what female psychopathy specifically looks like. I know I could ramble on, but I felt like it would be easier to just like give out some of these traits. And you can sit there and you can think about them, go over them. You can think about, you can use the whole Candace Owens and Erica Kirk situation as an example. But just keep in mind that it's interesting, because when people have already made up their mind about something, say there's two different people, they've heard the same information, but they have differing opinions or views. If you present the same information to them, they may just double down on their stance. They'll see whatever you present as something as some form of evidence for their individual beliefs. So it's really difficult to get people to kind of like reflect or think differently unless they're open-minded to doing so. If you can kind of clear your head from whether you want to use the Charlie Kirk assassination and Erica Kirk Candace Owens situation, or maybe one from your own personal life. Maybe you have a boss like this, or a friend, or maybe it's your mother. If you have something like that, try to clear your head, try to clear any biases you have, and that'll help you to be able to kind of understand female psychopathy and what these traits are a little bit better. So as I mentioned, obviously gossip, rumors, it is the mean girl, that type of persona or personality. Reputation destruction, social sabotage, and these are women who like to twist the words of other people to kind of make themselves look better or sound better or change the situation or the context of things. It's going to look like covert manipulation. So obviously they're not trying to manipulate people just out in the open or generally being extremely dumb about it. They're trying to do so in a very subtle way. So this makes female psychopaths more prone to conning people, so using people or putting themselves in situations where they get extra benefits out of it. Women with psychopathy are far less violent, as I've said. Instead, they can be quite engaging. They can have social lives, they can make friends, they can have relationships with people. And that makes it pretty difficult for a lot of people to actually, see them for who they are, or maybe some of the traits they do have. They often have superficial charm, but in saying superficial charm, you also have to remember that grandiose narcissistic women also have superficial charm. That even sometimes women with other personality disorders can have superficial charm. Sometimes a woman can go in for an interview or a specific scenario, and we all know where it's like, when you answer the phone and your voice goes up 1 or 2 octaves because you're trying to be professional. So you've got to take that with a grain of salt. But if there's generally like this superficial charm going on, that may be something to consider. So they have a grandiose sense of worth. They're typically very confident. They have very thick skin. Male psychopaths also have fairly thick skin, and I'll get into this a little later, but it's why some of the women with psychopathy, they make really good CEOs or CFOs. They can be really good in leadership because they have such thick skin. People's comments, the negative things or the negative accusations or experiences on them they don't take them to heart. A lack of empathy and remorse. So female psychopaths, some of them do cry, some of them can cry, they can appear to have emotions, And they do have a level of emotions. They're not completely emotionless, but they do lack empathy and genuine remorse. They distort facts for personal benefit. They tend to instigate drama, as I said, like social media. Sometimes, you can gossip and spread rumors in person, but that's kind of gone online now. So we see that even in younger generations. There's a lot of young girls who suffer from anxiety and depression because of what other girls say about them online, or rumors they spread, or photos they share, or various things they do. These women pivot and deflect whenever they're exposed. So it's if you say, hey, you did this, they're going to justify it there, or they may just turn it around on somebody else, or potentially you. They're incapable of being defeated, that they can't be genuinely vulnerable. So again, psychopathy, a lot of psychopathy is about dominance. It looks a little different in men and women, but female psychopaths still want to dominate their targets. They want to dominate people who try and challenge them, and it's a game. They're not going to sit there and be vulnerable unless they think they're going to get something out of it. So that would be like, if they're in court or they're in a legal situation and they need to cry or they need to show some type of remorse or guilt, you may see a little bit of vulnerability there, but it's more than likely just fake. If they can't destroy someone directly, they're going to turn towards their family and friends. So if their attacks on you are not working, if you're good at ignoring it, if you see through them, well, it's not like they're going to stop wanting to destroy you. They're just going to turn to have other people dislike you. So they're quite literally going to destroy you from the outside in, or at least try to. They can't be wrong. So this is another one. So sometimes narcissistic people, even various other personality disorders, that not everybody likes to be wrong, and that's okay. So just because somebody hates being wrong doesn't mean they're a psychopath. That's not what this means. But for female psychopaths, they don't like to be wrong. They're going to, again, justify or come up with explanations, or turn it towards something else or somebody else generally. There's no genuine self-reflection. So self-reflection is obviously where people can look inwards and like, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? They may feel guilt or shame about what they said about somebody or what they did towards somebody. If they made somebody feel bad, or if they spread false information, they may come out and apologize, and not only apologize, but they're going to stop doing that. So if there's no genuine self-reflection, that's a pretty big key that something's not right in regards to their personality, whether it's psychopathy or something else. Just not being able to self-reflect is a red flag. There's different types of psychopathy. There's primary and secondary. I'll get into those soon. So secondary types of psychopaths can be more impulsive. You're generally going to find this in people with higher levels of neuroticism, which means they're more emotionally unstable. You may see that in psychopathic women with lower IQs, or those that are lower in conscientiousness, so impulsive, reckless decisions that kind of lead them to prison or getting in trouble or various things. If female psychopaths are intelligent, as I said previously, they can rise quite easily to roles in leadership because of certain personality traits. They can be dishonest, and it's often hidden via manipulation. So they can have pathological lying, but it's often through manipulation, so you may not be able to see through all of it or really know exactly who they are deep down. Again, they may be promiscuous. You'll probably see this more in like secondary psychopathy. Even, I see a lot of news stories about female teachers that are like engaging in sexual activities with their students, which is obviously like even some very young students. So I think that would be a big indicator of female psychopathy, promiscuous, seeking some type of attention, dominance, especially over vulnerable people. They're callous and cruel to those who challenge their views and opinions. So that's pretty self-explanatory. They're motivated by profit or notoriety. So male psychopaths tend to be more, they care about physical domination, or just like domination in general. So women, yes, they care about dominating others and challenging others, but it's typically motivated by profit or some type of fame or notoriety. They can often be in caretaking roles, which may surprise some people. But if you think about it, that if part of psychopathy is about dominating other people, that it makes sense. Well, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, if you're a psychologist, if you're in various caretaking roles or aged care, you're taking care of vulnerable people. There's vulnerable people in front of you. And in those situations, it would be you having, or that person having the power, or having power over them. So that could be a role that they would enjoy. They would get some type of sadistic pleasure out of it. They will challenge others for dominance. This would be more like primary female psychopaths. So in leadership positions, or if they're in the media or various things, that you're going to see that more. But it also may be more normalized because certain industries kind of allow for people to challenge each other or to kind of go after one another. But they don't stop. So the ultimate goal is still kind of destroying the target. And again, they usually do so like covertly, very subtly, and via reputation damage, whether that's directly to the person or, from their outside circle in. They do struggle to connect on an emotional level or have intimate relationships. Female psychopaths do have relationships. That the majority of psychopaths are probably married or in relationships. They're out there functioning and living normal lives. They do account for at least like 1% of all women, what we know so far, that is. So most of them are not serial killers. They're not these violent people, but they may be doing these type of things. So they typically have transactional relationships. They're not sitting down with their partners, like having in-depth discussions and going over how they feel and asking other people how they feel. They don't care about genuine emotional connection. It's very transactional. It's very surface level. Many women with female psychopathy have narcissistic tendencies. So when you start getting into like the personality disorders or personality tendencies, everything is on a spectrum. So if you're a female listening right now, you have some psychopathic traits. Everybody does. So that doesn't mean you're a terrible person or anything's necessarily wrong with you, but everybody has a certain level of psychopathic traits. It doesn't mean they're a psychopath or that they're going to get antisocial personality disorder or commit acts of crime. That's not what that means. But yes, there are presentations of other personality disorders in psychopathy. So there's even a big overlap between psychopathy and borderline personality disorder. Some people view borderline personality disorder as the female version of psychopathy. There's still borderline personality disorder is a completely different diagnosis. So it is very different, but there is some overlap. Some of the overlap often it can correlate more with secondary psychopathy, so like emotional instability, unstable friendships or romantic relationships, having a splitting personality kind of, and what that means is they see the world in black and white. They either idolize a person one moment and then they devalue them the next moment. So yeah, it's like this love or hate relationship with people. There's no in between. If they're looking at a situation, it is black and white. There's no gray in between it, and again, they're always right. And you're going to see that in borderline personality disorder and psychopathy a lot of the time. Again, impulsive behaviors, both behaviors, but also how they present verbally. They may yell at people or act out or name call or various things. They can have difficulty controlling anger and villainize people. So those are just some of the overlaps between borderline personality disorder and some women with psychopathy, more of the secondary psychopathy. I know that was a long, extensive list, but I hope it gave you a bit more insight into like what female psychopathy looks like. An easier way to think of it, or if you're really just looking for a few traits, not to actually diagnose somebody or accuse somebody of psychopathy, but if you notice a pattern of women like participating in humiliating other people and gaslighting and gossiping and spreading rumors, that I think that's something pretty significant to look out for. If a woman causes emotional distress to people in their lives, or especially to people they don't know, that's That's not a good sign. It doesn't always mean they have psychopathy, but those are potential indicators of it. If they leave trails of just hurt and confusion, so if they really hurt everybody in personal relationships, in their work environment, if the people closest to them feel really hurt and emotionally distressed by their behavior, or the people that they used to know or used to work with, that could be a pretty big indicator. And even if they focus on reward while under responding to legal threats or punishment, I think that's a pretty big thing. So it's like, nobody can hurt me, I'm above the law, I can do these things, that they can justify a lot of their behavior, and they assume that other people will see it in the same way they do, through their lens. So they don't fear these things. Their amygdala is underactive. They don't have the same fear response as the majority of people that don't have psychopathy do. So as I said, there's an overlap between psychopathy, so a little bit of narcissism, or like grandiose narcissism, and borderline personality disorder. A good way to kind of differentiate those is the root, kind of the core part of the personality behind it. So people or women with psychopathy, even men with psychopathy, they seek to dominate other people. People with narcissism or grandiose narcissism, more specifically, they need or want attention. That's their primary goal. And then people with borderline personality disorder are desperate to have their needs met. They usually have a fear of abandonment, and that they act out in order to get their emotional needs met. So as I mentioned, there's primary psychopathy and secondary psychopathy. Primary psychopathy is going to be women that are more like charming, they're calculated, they can be very callous, just they don't have a lot of emotional regard for other people. And this type of psychopathy would align more with like successful psychopaths. These are going to be women in positions of leadership, that they're not impulsive or reckless. They are very carefully calculated. They can have their lives together quite well, and sometimes they can even really like flourish and do well for a company, because they're very good under pressure. They don't have that fear response. If people are saying negative things about them in the media or in their company or even in their circle, it really doesn't bother them. So sometimes people with psychopathy can actually do really well and thrive in certain roles, and it can be good for companies. Not every psychopath is violent or a serial killer, or what some people actually assume or think of them. In saying that, these primary psychopaths have low amounts of neuroticism. So this looks like having low anxiety. They're pretty emotionally stable people. They're put together. They're typically extroverted, disagreeable, and they're lower in neuroticism. Secondary psychopathy is going to look like people who are impulsive, people who are reckless, people who do wind up in prison, or being more sexually promiscuous. It's going to look like doing more risky behaviors, whether that's drugs or using certain substances, and it's often driven by higher levels of anxiety. It's driven by anger or emotional needs. So yeah, very different in regards to kind of how these two types of psychopaths work. There's a few psychologists out there that have noticed this as well, that there seems to be a verbal disconnect between how they speak. So for instance, they may say like, I care about them, or I miss them, but at the same time, they also may say that they hope they burn in hell, or that they're disgusting people. So it's not necessarily like this disconnect between their actions and their words, but their words or what they say are they contradict each other. So again, you have to take some of this with a grain of salt. Not everybody who does this is going to be a psychopath. They're not going to have psychopathy. But it's just something to keep in mind. Look for certain disconnect in people's words, or how they can contradict or villainize people or idolize people simultaneously, or at different times throughout their lives or throughout the day. They're also going to have a difficult time processing emotional words in the way that people without psychopathy are going to do. In saying this, sometimes people who are on the autism spectrum, they may have a difficult time processing certain emotions or facial expressions, or emotional facial cues. So it's not just something in psychopathy. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, it's just reminding you to listen to how they, if you want to like ask them how to just, how do they describe love? How do they describe their emotions towards somebody? Like, how do they feel about people? If you listen to that, it'll sound very different. You can ask somebody who doesn't have psychopathy, and they're going to be able to describe love or describe what they're feeling. I know not everybody can do so as eloquently as others, but generally they'll be able to say something. It'll seem kind of genuine. With psychopathy, you're not really going to get that. And lastly, people or women with psychopathy, they're going to frequently try to reframe the situation. But it's difficult even in saying that, because so will narcissistic women, so will various other women with different mental challenges or personality disorders. But yes, they typically are going to reframe the situation to justify their behavior, justify what they said, or just turn the situation onto somebody else. It'll be that deflection. They're going to gaslight, so there's not a lot of genuine expression in who they are. It's somebody else's fault, or they have a clever way of trying to turn it around to make themselves look like the good person or the smart person or whatever it is they want to be that will allow for them to dominate the other person or their target. Now, even in the post I initially kind of was referring to from Elizabeth Lane, she mentioned a lot of traits, and sometimes people do that. They'll say this: psychopaths have various looks in their eyes, or various facial expressions, or they lack certain things, or they have cold eyes. And there's not really a lot of basis behind that. If you watch some of the interviews with women with antisocial personality disorder, and that this is the other thing, is psychopathic women, it doesn't mean that they're committing acts of violence or crime. So they're not often interviewed in some of those cases. So the cases, like whether it's Elizabeth Holmes or Eileen Warnos or what's her name, Jodi Arias, that those are more like prominent or public women with antisocial personality disorder, because they have committed crimes. But that may even look quite differently to just psychopathic women who haven't committed crimes. Sometimes it would be looking at kind of that mean girl, that girl who spreads a lot of rumors and gossips and wants to humiliate other people. And you're not going to see the same facial expression in them. Even those 3 women that I listed, if you watch interviews with them, they all have a little bit of a different demeanor. They're not replicas of each other. It's not like this copy-paste. So if you're trying to diagnose somebody or claim that somebody's a psychopath because of the way their eyes look, or because of how they're responding to like one question in an interview, and you don't really have insight into their lives or their personal lives or what they're actually like in person, that I don't think it's going to be very accurate. And I would just kind of caution people to accuse other women of things like psychopathy, or because it can also be very hurtful to that woman. It can be hurtful to her family. And it's especially when a lot of the traits or the characteristics that you're trying to kind of put out there are not necessarily accurate. If you'd like to see where you may fall in terms of female psychopathy, I've come up with a survey. It's not published, it's not researched, but these are very, very, very based on female psychopathic traits and characteristics. So yes, 20 questions. I'll put them on the screen. I'll read them out, and you'll just have to choose or write down, whether it's on your phone or a piece of paper, whether you strongly agree, disagree, if you're neutral, if you agree, or strongly agree. And at the end, we'll calculate and weigh those up. For each of the 20 questions, you'll need to either choose 1 for strongly disagree, 2 for disagree, 3 for neutral, 4 for agree, or 5 for strongly agree. Question number 1 is, I often use charm, compliments, or flattery to influence people and get what I want, even if my feelings aren't real or sincere. This includes things like sweet-talking someone to borrow money or get favors without truly caring about them. Question number 2, I see myself as better than most people and feel I should get special privileges or treatment because of it. For example, expecting others to let me cut in line or give me exceptions, believing I'm smarter or more deserving. Question number 3. I regularly tell lies, stretch the truth, or make up stories to escape trouble, impress others, or make myself seem more important. This could mean fabricating details about my past achievements or situations to avoid blame or gain admiration. Question number 4. I control or trick others by acting like a victim, using emotional stories or twisting situations to make them do what I want, like crying or exaggerating hardships to guilt trip someone into helping me, or playing on their emotional sympathies for personal gain. Question number 5. I seldom feel bad or guilty after emotionally hurting someone, taking advantage of them, or causing them pain in relationships. For instance, after betraying a friend's trust or breaking someone's heart, I move on quickly without regret. Question number 6. My feelings seem surface level. I don't form deep emotional bonds or genuinely share in others' joys or sorrows. This means emotions like love or sadness feel fleeting or fake, and I struggle to connect on a heartfelt level. Number 7, I don't feel much compassion for people who are in pain or struggling unless helping them somehow benefits me directly. For example, ignoring a friend's crisis until it gives me an opportunity to look good or gain something. Number 8, I depend on other people, like romantic partners, family, or friends, to provide money, emotional support, or other needs while I give little or nothing back. This includes living off others without contributing or using relationships mainly for what I can get out of them. Number 9, in heated discussions or conflicts, I sometimes lash out with mean words, insults, or verbal attacks, and then brush it off later as no big deal, like saying cruel things in the moment to win an argument without apologizing or feeling remorse afterwards. Number 10, I get involved in short-term or casual sexual or romantic encounters without developing real emotional attachments or commitments. This means treating relationships as fun or convenient, but not investing feelings or loyalty. Number 11, when I was a kid or teenager, I often gossiped, lied, ditch schooled, bullied, or manipulated peers, or broke rules at home or school. For example, spreading rumors about classmates, stealing small items, or deceiving people regularly. Number 12, I don't make detailed plans for the future. I prefer to live day by day without setting serious long-term goals for career, relationships, or personal growth. This includes avoiding commitments like saving money or pursuing education, focusing only on my immediate wants. Number 13, I make quick decisions based on urges, such as spending money impulsively, quitting jobs suddenly, or taking risks without considering the long-term consequences. For instance, buying expensive items on a whim, even if it leads to debt, or acting recklessly in social situations. Number 14, I frequently dodge my duties, like work tasks, bills, or promises to others, by coming up with excuses, delaying, or just ignoring them. This means letting responsibilities pile up, like not paying rent on time or flaking on commitments repeatedly. Number 15, I almost never admit when I'm wrong or take full blame for my errors. Instead, I shift the fault to others or circumstances. For example, blaming a partner for a breakup caused by my actions or denying responsibilities in conflicts. Number 16, I get revenge on people who upset me by spreading gossip, rumors, or excluding them from social groups, damaging their reputation without direct confrontation. This includes sharing false or exaggerated stories to turn friends against someone or using social media to subtly undermine them. Number 17, I can change my emotions on the spot to fit what the situation needs, like pretending to be upset or sympathetic to manipulate others' reactions. For instance, faking tears to get out of trouble or acting caring to gain trust, even if I feel nothing inside. Number 18, I get excitement from breaking rules, fooling people, or pulling off deceptions without anyone noticing. This means enjoying the rush of lying successfully or bending laws for personal thrill, like shoplifting small items or cheating in games. Number 19, my relationships are often unstable or transactional. I quickly go from admiring someone intensely to criticizing or discarding them when they no longer serve me. For example, idolizing a new friend or partner at first, then devaluing them over minor issues and moving on abruptly. Number 20, I don't feel bound by common moral rules or ethics. I do whatever benefits me, even if it means ignoring right and wrong. This includes justifying selfish actions like exploiting others without concern for fairness or societal norms. All right, and you can add up the scores from those 20 questions now. If you got between 20 and 40, you would be low in female psychopathy. Anything from 41 to 70 would mean you're about average, and anything from 71 to 100 would mean that you may have more female psychopathic traits. Again, this is not researched, it's not published, but it may give you more insight or more of an idea as to where you would be in terms of female psychopathy. So I hope this video was a little bit informational, gave you a little bit more insight into female psychopathy. Maybe it'll make you make some better decisions in the future, whether it comes to dating or making friends, or even when you are at your workplace and you may have a boss or a colleague that kind of acts like this. Yeah, I thank you for watching. I hope it maybe answers your questions, or maybe you can look even at the Charlie Kirk case a little bit differently in terms of what Candace Owens is saying versus what Erica Kirk may be saying, or some of their attitudes or behaviors or presentations. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon.